Tonight I'll read poems by W.H. Auden, Osip Mandelstam, T.S. Eliot, Robert Frost and Allen Ginsberg. All were modernists, and their differences show how broad modernism was. Eliot, for example, was a progressive modernist and very much rejected the attitude of the avant-garde and its destructiveness. But I'll begin with Auden, whose ability to entrain political and social observation in a work of art I very much admire. It seems to me that he was a realist like the playwrights of classical Greece, where people are human and hence flawed, and fate is often cruel, but heroes prevail through strengths of character. This is Auden, who was beat even before I had this book in my rucksack for years. And I'm going to read you Musée des Beaux-Arts, a particular favourite of mine. And Auden, along with the other people I'll read, can often, in one small saying, encapsulate a huge amount of knowledge. Musée des Beaux-Arts. About suffering they were never wrong, the old masters. How well they understood its human position, how it takes place while someone else is eating, or opening a window, or just walking dully along. How when the aged are reverently, passionately waiting for the miraculous birth, there always must be children who did not especially want it to happen, skating on a pond at the edge of the wood. They never forgot that even the dreadful martyrdom must run its course, anyhow in a corner, some untidy spot, where the dogs go on with their doggy life, and the torturous horse scratches its innocent behind on a tree. In Bruegel's Icarus, for instance, how everything turns away, quite leisurely from the disaster. The ploughman may have heard the splash, the forsaken cry, but for him it was not an important failure. The sun shone as it had to on the white legs disappearing into the green water, and the expensive, delicate ship that must have seen something amazing, a boy falling out of the sky, had somewhere to get to and sailed calmly on. Poetry needs a little bit of space around it, and actually this reading will not be long, probably less than 20 minutes. The next poem by Auden is called In Memory of W.B. Yeats, the poet, the Irish poet who died in January 1939. He disappeared in the dead of winter. The brooks were frozen, the airports almost deserted, and snow disfigured the public statues. The mercury sank in the mouth of the dying day. What instruments we have agree, the day of his death was a dark, cold day. Far from his illnesses, the wolves ran on through the evergreen forests. The peasant river was untented by fashionable quays. By morning tongues, the death of the poet was kept from his poems. But for him it was his last afternoon as himself, an afternoon of nurses and rumours. The provinces of his body revolted, the squares of his mind were empty. Silence invaded the suburbs. The current of his feeling failed. He became his admirers. Now he is scattered amongst 100 cities and wholly given over to unfamiliar affections, to find his happiness in another kind of wood and be punished under a foreign code of conscience. The words of a dead man are modified in the guts of the living, but in the importance and noise of tomorrow, when the brokers are roaring like beasts on the floor of the bourse, and the poor have the sufferings to which they are fairly accustomed, and each in the cell of himself is almost convinced of his freedom. A few thousand will think of this day, when one thinks of a day when one did something slightly unusual. What instruments we have agree, The day of his death was a dark, cold day. You were silly like us. The gifts survived it all. The parish of rich women, physical decay. Yourself. Mad Ireland hurt you into poetry. Now Ireland has her madness and her weather still, for poetry makes nothing happen. It survives in the valley of its making, where executives would never want to tamper, flows on south from ranches of isolation and the busy griefs, raw towns we believe and die in. It survives, a way of happening, a mouth. Earth receive an honoured guest. William Yeats is laid to rest. Let the Irish vessel lie, empty of its poetry. In the nightmare of the dark, all the dogs of Europe bark, and the living nations wait, each sequestered in its hate. Intellectual disgrace stares from every human face, and the seas of pity lie, locked and frozen in each eye. Follow poet, follow right, to the bottom of the night. With your unconstraining voice, still persuade us to rejoice. With the farming of a verse, make a vineyard of the curse. Sing of human unsuccess in a rapture of distress. In the desert of the heart, let the healing fountain start. In the prison of his days, teach the free man how to praise. Next, I'll read from T.S. Eliot's 4 quartets, his masterwork. Eliot was very influenced by Indian religious philosophy, but then abandoned it to become an Anglo-Catholic. But still, in this poem, you see his early embracing of that philosophy that I described. I don't know if I agree with this poem, but it's very beautiful, in my view. This is from Burnt Norton, and it's just the first section. Time present and time past are both perhaps present in time future, and time future contained in time past. If all time is eternally present, all time is unredeemable. What might have been is an abstraction, remaining a perpetual possibility, only in a world of speculation. What might have been and what has been point to one end, which is always present. Footfalls echo in the memory, down the passage we did not take, toward the door we never opened, into the rose garden. My words echo thus in your mind, but to what purpose, disturbing the dust on a bowl of rose leaves? I do not know. Other echoes inhabit the garden. Shall we follow? Quick, said the bird, find them, round the corner, through the first gate, into our first world. Shall we follow the deception of the thrush? Into our first world. There they were, dignified, invisible, moving without pressure over the dead leaves in the summer heat through the vibrant air. And the bird called in response to the unheard music hidden in the shrubbery, and the unseen eye-beams crossed, for the roses had the look of flowers that are looked at. There they were as our guests, accepted and accepting. So we moved, and there, in a formal pattern, along the empty alley, into the box circle, to look down into the drained pool. Dry the pool, dry concrete, brown-edged, and the pool was filled with water out of sunlight, and the lotus rose quietly, the surface glittered out of the heart of light. And they were behind us, reflected in the pool. Then a cloud passed, and the pool was empty. Go, said the bird, for the leaves were full of children, hidden excitedly, containing laughter. Go, 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 said the bird. Humankind cannot bear very much reality. Time past and time future, what might have been, what has been, point to one end, which is always present. Excuse me. Next, a poem by the Russian writer Osip Mandelstam, whose career began in the Russian Silver Age, before the revolution, with people like Nabokov and Anna Akhmatova. And then gradually, as the situation changed, his situation changed, and after writing a poem critical of Stalin, he was imprisoned and died in the gulags. But this is before all that happened. It has a particular line that I like, which I'm sure you'll notice. It's called The Admiralty. In the northern capital, a dusty poplar languishes. A translucent clock face is lost in the leaves, and through the dark green, a frigate or acropolis gleams far away, brother of water and sky, an aerial ship and a touch-me-not mast, a yardstick for Peter's successors, teaching that beauty is no demigod's whim, it's the plain carpenter's fierce rule of eye. The four severan elements smile on us, but man in his freedom is made of fifth. Do not the chaste lines of this arc deny the dominions of space? The capricious jellyfish clutch in anger. Anchors are rusting like abundant ploughs. And behold, the lock to the three dimensions is sprung, and all the seas of the world lie open. The last two poets are American, and their subject is America itself, and their part in defining it. The first is Robert Frost, who was a farmer as well as a poet. And both of these poets, in a way, are touched by American transcendentalism, which is evident in the work of people like Henry David Thoreau and Walt Whitman. And in fact, Walt Whitman enters the last poet I'll read. But first, two poems by Robert Frost. These are very, very widely known, and could be said that they're vulgarized. But isn't it interesting for us as architects to think of something that becomes so popular and yet maintains its rigor as art? The first poem is called The Road Not Taken. I'm sure you know it. It goes like this. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood. Sorry I could not travel both and be one traveller. Long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth, then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that, the passing there had warned them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. It explains to me how incidental decisions are, and yet how momentous. The second and last one by Frost. I guess if you were an American high school student, you would know this. It's called Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harnessed bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sound's the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. Some space. The final poem is by Allen Ginsberg from this collection called Howl, its first publication. And I know some people on Instagram have hoped that I might read Howl itself, but it's very long and actually full of sentiments that are probably not appropriate right now. So instead I'm going to read a poem called The Supermarket in California. Ginsberg was a beat poet, friend of Jack Kerouac and William S. Burroughs. And it's what strikes me is how it abandons all poetic sense in pursuit of the personal bohemian of its times and the right of self-expression. This was a period in post-war America where people were defining themselves by a form of anarchy and freedom. So is it poetry? I don't know, but it's gripping. A supermarket in California. What thoughts I have of you tonight, Walt Whitman. For I walk down the side streets under the trees with a headache, self-conscious, looking at the full moon. In my hungry fatigue and shopping for images, I went into the neon fruit supermarket, dreaming of your enumerations. What peaches and what penumbras, whole families shopping at night, aisles full of husbands, wives in the avocados, babies in the tomatoes. And you, Garcia Lorca, what are you doing down by the watermelons? I saw you, Walt Whitman, childless, lonely old grubber, poking amongst the meats in the refrigerator and eyeing up the grocery boys. I heard you asking a question of each. Who killed the pork chops? What price bananas? Are you my angel? I wandered in and out of the brilliant stacks of cans, following you, and followed in my imagination by the store detective. We strode down the open corridors together in our solitary fancy, tasting artichokes, possessing every frozen delicacy, and never passing the cashier. Where are you going, Walt Whitman? The door closes in an hour. Which way does your beard point tonight? I touch your book and dream of our odyssey in the supermarket and feel absurd. Will we walk all night through solitary streets? The trees add shade to shade, lights out in the houses. We'll both be lonely. Will we stroll dreaming of the lost America of love, past blue automobiles and driveways, home to our silent cottage? Ah, dear father, greybeard, lonely old car teacher, what America did you have when Sharon quit polling his ferry and you got out on the smoking bank and watched the boat disappear on the black waters of Lethe? That's it. No more. That was 7.5 minutes, I think. Okay, I'll bid you farewell.